The Gentlementor.
Well, and that goes back to just that very scripture in itself that talks about no eyes see, no ears hear, no heart has can conceive what we have no idea. Simply, we have no idea. And we may have mentioned this before, but when I grew up in the denominational church, I mean, I remember the Sunday school teachers talking about how wonderful heaven's going to be because we're going to all cast our crowns upon the glassy sea. And we're going to worship the Lord for 24 hours a day,
Right on.
7 days a week, all this time. All we're going to do is worship.
Mansions and streets of gold and pearly gates,
all that stuff. And the bigger mansion you get, the more jewels in your crown, all this kind of stuff. And I remember thinking the one thing that really got me was the worshiping God all the time. And my first thought went back to our worship service with all those women in the blue choir robes sitting in the brown chairs with the hymnals. And I thought, that's what heaven's going to be?
So heaven's going to be like church feels.
Exactly. So I was like, I think I want to hang around a little while. I think I want to get my driver's license. I think I want to find out what love is really like. So I began to, think about what's life going to be like. If I didn't have to be in a church setting 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So it got me thinking I wanted to live my life. I want to do some things. So that's for that reason, I have refrained giving my opinions even to my own children about what heaven is going to be like, except for that one. We have no idea. All I can tell you about is it's better than anything else you've ever experienced before. And God made a promise and he always keeps his promises. So that's it. Well, so I try to avoid that for my kids because I don't want that. I don't want that either. Now I have an opinion about what I think, not so much dissimilar than yours. And again, we've talked about this before. We're going to focus on the damnable heresies, whether or not I believed, whether or not it's 6 days that God created the earth or 600,000 years, it doesn't matter. That doesn't matter.
That's cultured pearl. That's cultured pearl.
We're all gonna get to heaven and go, damn, it was only 6 minutes.
Well, I know, and that's everybody's like, oh, I know when to go, and I'm gonna know my wife, and I'm like, well, I think Jesus is around there giving marriage, and they're not giving in marriage, but yeah, ignore that because you're worried about if your dog's gonna make it. And I don't know how to argue that.
No kidding.
Yeah. That's always my position. Is like I don't want to fix anything in my head because God already told me it's not something I can even imagine.
Why?
When Paul refuses to make comment on it, I knew a man, whether in the body or in the spirit, I do not know, who was caught up to the third heaven, and the things he saw were too fantastic to speak. I'm not gonna issue any. I'm not trying to tell anybody how it is, but Andy is like into this thing now, thinking about is the reality of heaven more, I don't know, like what
physical.
We've been told. More like what we imagined when we were kids and stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm not inclined to believe so, but I don't need to. But like I said, there's so many people who are so attached to the way things are here.
Right.
And it's like, well, I want to get there and know I'm going to know people. And I'm like, Andy, I don't think we're like individual people anymore. Well, we're still going to know. And I said, I don't think that we don't know who we are and that other people won't know who we are. I just don't know that it's quite as individual as we're thinking. We're still thinking in this here kind of framework. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying it ain't going to be that way. I'm just saying maybe it ain't. I said, what I think at this point, and this is probably almost heretical to say, is that God is kind of like a big, pardon me for using the word ocean, but like a sea of energy that's infinite. And that's where we come from. And that's where we're fighting to get back to. And somehow we'll just be absorbed back into that. And yes, in a sense, we're still an individual because he created us that way. Mm-hmm. But in another sense, we're going to know that we're part of the whole, which is the thing we've all spent our lives trying to get to. It's the thing we're all after, whether we can admit it or know it or not.
And we could sit and debate this and theory upon layer of different thoughts and ideas on how that works and how it comes to be and how it was and how God is. And for what reason? I just hope Andy's not disappointed. I love Andy. I hope he's when he gets there, he's going to be like, man, what I told Doug.
My number one opinion about heaven is that it's mostly going to be a bunch of people standing around going, because nobody's prepared for it.
No,
nobody's prepared. And when you talk to people about heaven, they talk about the same. I don't want to say
It,
asinine.
it depends
The
on
same
the generation.
minutia of goofy stuff in the
Depends
streets
on
of
the
gold.
generation.
In the mansion, will my
Yes.
dog be there? Will I know my wife? It's like, you're going to be going,
Yeah.
these questions you have in your head will be blown out. You won't
Right.
remember those questions
Right.
to ask them. Well, when I see the Lord, I'm going to ask. No, you're not. You're going to go, "Ugh." Your jaw is going to be on the floor. You're not asking nothing. Maybe this. I think I pooped my pants. Could somebody check and see if I pooped my pants?
Yes. Although that implies physical.
I know. See, I'm
See,
I
there
fall
you
into
go.
it too.
You're falling into that loop of being a human. Stop
Get
it.
my wife
Stop
to help
it.
me clean this up.
Stop it. Stop being human.
I can't help it. This to me, it's like the
funny.
biggest disappointment of listening to like theologians is how frequently they fall into that trap.
Yeah.
And their ideas about the way that God thinks and the way that God operates always fall into these like how we that's how we do it, so that's how God must do it. Like
that's something that my rabbi is he's so against. He goes, okay, you're trying to describe God.
Mm-hmm. It's a trap.
You better stop it. You're trying to describe God. You're
every
think,
time you limit him.
You are trying to think you understand God, and you better stop doing that because you can't. Your mind can't handle it. And it's a very sobering moment because you're like, oh yeah, you're right. We can't.
Mm-hmm.
We can't understand God. It like goes back to that song I keep here on one of my hard drives that you putting God in a box that you wrote. Boxes.
Yeah.
It was some of your best work. No, and that's exactly what it is. And we can't make that mistake. There was something else I was going to say about the whole heaven thing. Oh, there's two things that I refuse to get into. I don't mind getting into conversations with it like we are now, but if I were ever write a book, two things I absolutely would stay away from. Number one is my idea of heaven, and number two, my prediction of the rapture, because I've seen what happens to those two authors.
When it all goes wrong.
Unless you're making a movie about heaven. I don't know if anybody's made a really good movie about the rapture since Thief of the Night. And, and even the whole Left Behind series wasn't really that
even
good.
The make and the remake. Neither
one of them
were
the make
good.
and the remake. Yes. God bless you, Nicolas Cage. Nice try.
Yeah, there was something else I was going to say. There was another thing I was going to say about Andy, and I can't remember what it was on this specific topic that I was kind of hitting towards, and I lost my point too. Man, you know what?
I'm sorry.
No, it's not you. It's being over 50. This happens all the time. It's a real drag.
I will tell you.
And
you can't quote me on this, and I won't sign any affidavits or books, but I really believe when it comes to the rapture, blowing of the trumpet, that I think we're going to know within a few years. I would think. Because God always works in seasons, and he talks about that no one knows the hour of the day.
But what do you mean?
The season.
Right.
That I think for generation after generation, my dad thought it too. Before he died, that I'm in the season. We're in the season right now. The rapture.
Yeah.
But not that wasn't shared by everyone.
No.
I think we're going to be in the season where most, and I say everyone, most believers, most of the Christ followers on the planet are all going to be in this mode of like, yeah, I think we're the plane's about to land here.
Today
folks.
is the day, brother. Today is the day.
No, because no one knows the day or the hour.
I know. No, I mean today is the day when a lot of the Christians are all going. We were watching we were watching the Game of Thrones last night. And there's a scene, and they're all fight, and there's a big battle going on. Everybody's fighting. And I was sitting here, and everybody at once stops and goes. And I was like, ooh,
that's it. Yeah.
Feel that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No, I mean, people that I've known my entire life who were never given to speaking about eschatology, suddenly it's a hot topic they want to talk about.
Oh, yeah.
Sure. Well, Andy specifically would be one who never wanted to touch it before. And even, I mean, just since the COVID thing and all that happened, he's like, oh, man, I don't know. I don't like the way this is feeling. I'm like,
Yeah. And I still don't. If I were to be on that line of like, okay, if someone were to say, Mark, seriously, do you think this is a season? I'd still say no. I don't think it is.
Oh, I don't think we're there.
I think it's getting.
But I'm
I think it's
remember all those
exponentially getting worse.
Yeah, I just think all those times that it got spicy in the past, and everybody went,
yeah,
and I went,
nah.
Now I'm like, ooh, yeah, this is. What's that smell? I'm like, it could be.
we're closer. We're closer because
Every day.
we go. That's true. Well, I mean, because it talks about as it was in the days of Noah, it'll also be in the end times, and people were giving to marriage, spending bukus, because we all know that a wedding is expensive. People were just partying, living it up, and now people
going
are
to
a
and
lot more
fro.
cash than
Information was flying around faster than it ever had before. Oh yeah. So I know every time a generation thinks, oh, this, I'm like, how about now? Does this feel like it now? Because even the people that like,
I don't feel it. I don't
think we're in the parking lot or anything, but
10, 20, maybe another 50 years.
I would say this is, in my mind, this is like the beginning of the birth pangs.
Okay. Yeah.
It's like that first one. That first contraction was like.
And if everything since that, we have to keep in mind, if you're scaling time out, everything since the resurrection of Christ was the conception. And so this has just been, what is a birth? 38 weeks, 39 weeks, 40 weeks for a gestation period. So 40 weeks. So this is now just 39 weeks up to this point.
Yeah.
So the 40th week still could be another 200 or 300 years, probably.
Sure.
Yeah, if this is just the beginning of the birth pains, if what you're saying, which I like your analogy, I like that. I mean, that's brilliant.
It's all about momentum.
It's all about what?
Momentum.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Like you kept clipping out.
Oh, I'm sorry. Once it starts, it's like, how fast will it move?
Right.
How exponentially will it pick up speed now that it's underway? Because in my personal humble opinion, I think the Twin Towers is actually I think that's the kickoff.
Was that the?
And I think we're slow rolling.
Think it was Braxton Hicks?
No, I think it was a slow roll. I think that was the first thing that kind of, all the things that we have going on now were actually set in motion about 2010 from a political legal standpoint. They didn't actually start then. The groundwork for them goes back, and it follows back to that 9/11 thing. That's where, and it's been there all along. I think super slow roll, I mean, ultimately, it's all been heading to the end. So it's all downhill to the sea, so to speak. But yeah, I think that started what I would call the final season. And like you said, that doesn't mean like 6-month season. That could be a 100, 200 year season. But I think that kicked the ball over the hill. Yeah. And now it's gathering speed. And I think that's what we will notice. Not the changes over time, but how quickly the changes start following one another. Still could take 50 or 100 years. No problem. We study the Bible, and how many times in the Bible and immediately thus and thus shall happen, and it was 20 years. Right. This day you shall, and it was 100 years. It doesn't mean anything. The other thing about the heaven thing. No, eye has not seen, and ear has not heard, nor has it entered into the hearts of man what God has prepared for those who love him. What's the next line?
You'll have to tell me.
I won't. This is the part that caught me off guard. I didn't know there was a next line. And I was like, oh, well, that adds a wrinkle, doesn't it?
That changes it.
It adds a wrinkle, because what it says is, but he has revealed it it's been revealed through his spirit.
Okay.
Andy takes that back to his head. I'm like, but that doesn't explain what that means. What does it mean that he has revealed these things through his spirit? Does it mean that we know in our hearts what's going to be there? Or does it mean that we should know in our hearts that there's no way we could know what's going to be there? Does it mean that he's revealed it through his spirit by what you just read? Is he talking about the actual written word? And so that's where we go to, because he's not indicating what that means and how he's, so I'm like, that's the next thing you have to dig into for me, is to see what that language is about. If that's pointing at something specifically, or if it's just kind of who knows?
Well, we all, we think these things, we generate these ideas, like, whether it's from teaching, whether it's the way we've grown up, because they are things that we've heard. They are movies that we've seen. They are things that we have read. They are all things that we have taken in by our natural senses, by our 5 senses. Is that right? 5 senses. We have 5 senses. when Jesus was talking to Peter and he says, who do people say that I am? And when he says, you are the Son of God, you are the Christ. He says, no one has told you this. You did what he says is you do not know this by your 5 natural senses. You have learned this by spiritual revelation, which I'll build my church upon. So yeah, so that's consistent with God revealing things by his Spirit. But still, again, going back to what you were saying, we're still people in this physical world that still gets mixed in with our thoughts, our previous teachings, the things that we've read, the things that we
not unfiltered, not unfiltered,
right? So yeah, it would be hard to drive a wedge between that. There's kind of some coloring outside the line to really go, okay, well, if he has revealed that, what is it really that's not affected by the stories that I've been told or the flannel graph storyboards that I saw of heaven coming to earth with all the beautiful clouds and golden streets?
Just because it's been revealed by the Spirit, and if it's a non-physical, non-corporal, non-time reality, then it would have to be revealed by the Spirit. But it's revealed by the Spirit doesn't negate the first part.
True.
It still hasn't entered my mind. I still haven't seen it or heard it. Mm-hmm. It's in my heart. That's where the Spirit reveals things, is in our heart, I think. Right. Now, again, I know a broad spectrum of Christians, as do you. And if I'm speaking to my more traditional denominational friends, they're going to see that as Scripture. That's how God revealed is through his Spirit, through Scripture.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
If I hang out with my more, shall we say, charismatic friends, they're going to take that in a completely different direction. They're going, well, it's something that's not written. The Spirit is death, and the Spirit gives life. So the letter of the law is death, and the Spirit gives life. And so God reveals that in our hearts, like he does when he comes and woos us toward salvation. He's speaking directly into our hearts. It's not about a human language or a human concept. It's something, because it's a Spirit thing, it has to be communicated from Spirit to Spirit by spiritual means.
But how?
Well,
how can I communicate with you spiritually without using my voice and you using your ears?
I got for $19.99. I can sell you a diagram for a machine you could make at home with just some parts you can get at Lowe's. You can do time travel or spiritual communication with it, either one.
Ooh, how about spiritual time travel?
There's a switch on the side. You flip it from one.
Flip it from one to the other, and big plates.
Time travel, spiritual communication.
Spiritual communication. Oh man.
It's a real interesting
time. Someplace, I think. Yeah, it is. I was actually going to go someplace, I think, semi-relevant. Where I started joking about that. But anyway,
think it over.
When you were talking about your 2 different types of Christian friends, the charismatic type person.
More than 2. Those are just for that.
Well,
that
you just
example.
mentioned 2 in this particular example. You were only talking
for that
about
example.
2.
Those 2 mattered.
Those two, which I've got mine kind of blends in the middle. I think you can't get spiritual revelation without having Scripture in you. And then that comes from, I think that's agitated by you and I communicating. Woo-hoo! That's agitated by me going to.
I think you mean stirred up.
Sorry, no, I don't want to say that.
I think stirred up. I think you need.
Is that what it is? Is that what it is?
Hey, if you don't get stirred up, I'm going to have to ask you to tarry.
Okay.
I'm going to have to ask you to enter a time of self-imposed tarrying.
What's the point? It doesn't matter anyway.
No,
but I do. I feel very anointed at this moment.
Woo, glory!
No.
Glory! I may throw you a Shondai if you keep this going.
Man, you've been throwing me some Looney Tune ties, buddy.
Yeah, I mean, I got people all over the place that would kind of hit, and I probably my own belief is somewhere in the middle. Yeah, you got to have some Scripture in you. Also, Scripture is the litmus test.
Yes,
like you shouldn't hear stuff from God that disagrees with stuff that's in the Bible.
Or you shouldn't make things and make up things and say they're in the Bible. Like cleanliness is next to godliness.
Especially don't make stuff up and say it's in the Bible. But yeah, that's especially bad.
Yes.
Yeah, that's especially bad.
That's especially bad. Let's don't do that.
Try to avoid that.
Oh, I'm sure I've been guilty of it, thinking that was in the Bible.
Oh, I've done it. Well, we were talking.
And then you go, what? That's not even in that. What? Are you
That's
sure?
that's what
not
made
even in
me
the Bible.
so
Yeah.
reticent to enter the conversation is like the times that I can remember in the past 20 years that I was just so sure I knew what such and such said, that it was right, and told somebody and it said, go back and look, it's like, uh-oh,
Whoops.
that's not what that said at all.
Clearly misunderstanding.
Yeah. So yeah, I like to fact check myself when it comes to scripture stuff, because I don't want to be wrong when I don't have to be.
True. But again,
So,
let's go back to what one of them guys said, probably Paul. I'm going to make it up, but he said, I don't know anything except Christ died and rose again. That's it. And I always subscribe to the Andy Stanley thing. It's like, well, why do I follow Jesus? Well, if there's a guy who history records that can predict his own death and resurrection, I'm going to go with whatever he says.
seems reasonable.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I don't find it such a long money bet. I mean, I don't know. I guess there's a lot of pride and ego that is behind the idea that, like, you can't even enter into a dialogue about Christianity. You can't even take it that seriously. It's so
Right.
ridiculous that it's not even worth having a conversation about.
Right.
But that's all right. I don't need to argue anybody into anything.
The Gentlementor.